This is the model range that we want to introduce to you in today's video. These are the models that have been sold the most and have the biggest fan base. They have the best accessory supply and the biggest tuning scene. So we're going to set some more scooters up for you, and then we'll show you what it's all about. Now we have set up a little chronology. First series, second series, third series. Then something in between, which we'll explain to you later, and then at the end, the DLGP series. But we'll start, of course, with the first series.
Yeah, exactly. This is the LI, first series. Although there's a different fender on here now, but basically the key thing about the first series is that the headlight sits on the lag shield on the handlebars, actually only include the speedometer. Compared to the Cardan models, the design of the frame construction is completely different.
You remember, first there were the Cardan models with the relatively elaborate technology. After that, the LI, respectively the TV175, was released. That one still had a tube frame, but changed from the previous one. But most importantly, it had an engine with a horizontal cylinder and a chain drive. That was meant to simplify everything quite a bit, but it didn't quite yet for the first series of the TV175. Is that right?
Exactly, that was due to a new design on the engine. The first model that came after the Cardan models was the TV with 175 cubic. I think Vespa released the GS at the same time, a sport model, and Innocenti wanted to outdo them. The engine was still relatively complicated, and there was also a few designs that didn't run optimally. That's why they moved away from the engine concept of the first series, TV175, relatively quickly.
You remember, we did a video about Vespa wideframe models where we explained the GS150. That was Vespa's top model, or a sport model, at the time. Now Lambretta said, let's redo all this and try to get an edge on Vespa by releasing a Lambretta with 175cc. So from this first series, there was LI and TV models. TV models came out first, right away with more cubic capacity.
Shortly after the TV series, they released the LI first series, because it was going to be a volume model that simplified the engine design quite a bit. And they also learned some things, for example that the kickstart mechanics wasn't the best at the TV series. So all that was changed for the better. Simpler, easier to maintain, more trouble-free.
So this is a big ambitious plan. We're now bringing a new model line on the market, and the first thing we're doing is, we're going to show Vespa how it's really done. But unfortunately, this one wasn't as successful as Lambretta hoped it would be. So there are a few parts for the TV175 of the first series. You also told me a little anecdote about where the last of the productions were rumored to be.
Yes, allegedly there are rumors. Whether that is true, nobody knows. Well, it is true that a lot of people have divided for it. Allegedly, the TV first series have been sunk container-wise somewhere in the sea because they couldn't be sold. But no one knows if that's really happened.
Most likely just a rumor. But in any case, it's always a good anecdote to tell. In any case, there was also the LI from the first series, the LI 150, which we have here. That one was successful though. It already had a technique that was simplified and which passed the test of time and was then transferred to the second series.
Exactly, the frame and the outer sheet metal dress of the second series is 90% identical to the first series. You can see it immediately, the headlight moved into the handlebars. And that's really it. Not much else was changed.
Exactly. So if you want to differentiate that visually, one time the headlight is here, and one time it's up there. That's the simplest difference between the first and second series. But they did a little bit more. You can see it says TV175 on here. So there's again an LI and a TV version from the second series. But now the TV basically had the LI technology.
Right. So actually that was completely based on the LI engine, because that just proved to be cost-effective and reliable. However, a different crankshaft was used, with a longer connection rod and a shorter cylinder. But basically it was a LI engine.
So it's sort of the top model, which is finally working now. And on the side, you still have that nice laddering. I don't think the LI had that, did it?
No, the lettering on the TV was basically the same. Lambretta was on it, but on the TV they were chrome, for example. On the LI only polished aluminum. So extremely fine differences.
So you can see that the first and second series are visually very similar. But one thing comes to mind which I think was a turning point. What is a frame breather?
Yes, it was only on the Series 1 and only on the first models. In the Cardan days, it was still common that the carburetor intake was through the frame. And that concept was kept on the first LI. But this was also, of course, an awful elaborate design, and they got rid of that relatively quickly. And then, they just had the intake through a normal air filter box. That was then retained on the Series 2 and Series 3, and then later models.
Is it true that there used to be Series 1 models where the frames were too unstable and they cut the frames? So they cut the central tube open and simply inserted a piece of sheet metal.
They didn't have it in Series 1, but in Series 2. And as far as I know, it only happened for the TV and not the LI. The first models of the TV series, the ones that started with a 1 after the prefix, had a problem with the frame, because the frame was too weak. So they were recalled.
They accidentally made the frame of the second series weaker than for the first series?
The frame of the TV1 was a little bit different compared to the TV2. The engine suspension was also different. But what exactly the problem was, so that they suddenly took a thin tube, I'm not sure about that.
I don't know the name either, but maybe that's something quite fun for the comments. If you know how the post-reinforced frames of the TV second series are called in English, please write it in the comments. We're happy to hear about it. With this, I think we have said the most important things about Series 1 and Series 2. Then actually came a big break in the design.
When the Series 3 came along, which is often referred to as the Slim style, the Lambretta evolution took a big step forward. The entire body is narrow, but the frame is relatively similar. The build shape, especially the leg shape, but also the side panels, are all narrow and more streamlined, maybe faster.
The interesting thing is that the technology has actually remained almost the same, right?
Actually, yes, except for marginal improvements. I think mainly due to the fact that they just wanted to make production a bit cheaper. Because the Series 2 was still built more elaborately than the Series 3.
They had slimmed down the production. By the way, in my opinion, the scooter lifted Lambretta also visually into a new era.
In any case,
I think it's very well done. It's a very nice scooter too. In my opinion, the Legend Lambretta was created from the third series. But that's my personal feeling. I can also be wrong. With the third series, there was something that was very innovative. Here again, we have an LI. This piece is just taped off because it was recently mounted, I think.
Yeah, recently not.
Okay, we have the LI and TV models again, as in the first and second series, and at the beginning a TV 175 model again. So with the same displacement and the same technology. But there was an innovation that was quite new in the two-wheeler sector.
Yes, that was the disc brake. The third series of the TV175 was the first two-wheeler to come with the disc brakes as a standard. This was a huge step. All the motorcycles had drum brakes at the time, but for scooters it was a huge innovation.
We can show you real quick, because this one isn't it. This is a retrofitted one, but we have a scooter next to it that also had this disc brake installed as standard. Of course, it didn't have a drum brake, but the brake disc ran in this drum, so it was encapsulated. And it was accessed by a Bowden wire. So much for our short digression on the TV and the disc brake. But there was another evolution in the history of the third series, just in terms of cubic capacity, right?
Correct. The model was given a 200 cubic capacity very early on. An importer from the UK went to Innocenti and said, the customers, especially the mods, need more power. They need a sick scooter that really stands out. He talked them down until they actually brought a 200cc model to the market, and it was only available in the UK at first. Bis die wirklich eine 200er auf den Markt gebracht haben. Und die gab es dann auch erstmal nur in England. Later also in Scandinavia and Switzerland. But in Italy, the country of production itself, it was never actually released.
Interesting. Do you know in which year it was that the 200cc version was available?
Yes, that was actually very early. I don't know exactly, but I think it was 1963. In 1962, the 175 Series 3 came out, and I think it might have been in the same year. The problem is that the chassis number of the TV175 and TV200 are the same. They have a different prefix, but they run together.
So, if you remember, for the Vespa large frame, the first 200cc model was the Rally. Before that, they were available as 180cc models. And at the time when Lambretta released the TV, the first 180cc Vespa was being planned. So that was probably a little cubic capacity battle.
For sure, and Lambretta was already far leading. Also, Lambretta stated a top speed of 110 km/h for the TV. That was exaggerated, of course, but it was already a dig at Vespa, no doubt.
Also very interesting that you mentioned the English importer. Even today, it is still the case that we use many English terms with the Lambretta. You just mentioned slim style, and you mentioned the English name to the reinforced frame that we can't think of.
Frame breather.
Then we have frame breather, floorboards. I think the English people bought the Lambretta a lot more, and so they kind of influenced that naming and tuning there, right?
Right. England really had a great market, because the importer really promoted the Lambrettas in his country. They hired the band Gary and the Pacemakers, for example, to promote the Pacemaker Lambretta. There are quite a few anecdotes. They really pushed the Lambretta and built a huge sales network.
Because we had Lambretta.
Nothing.
And they were not sold original at all, so they did exist, but only in very small quantities. Right?
Yes, for the first and second series, there were still a couple German models, but from the third series on, there was nothing anymore. There was one importer that distributed a handful, but that was it.
Once again to remember, first series, second series, third series. All three series had LI and TV. First the TV175, then the TV200, with a somewhat light modified body. Now it's getting a little complicated. Lambretta might have thought, everyone got used to this, so let's mix it all up with an LI special, and then we'll release an SX, partly with the same shape. Can you explain this? We have an SX200 here. What is it?
The SX200 is actually the successor of the TV200.
Und die hat
It
dann
already
schon
has the
alle
current design elements.
aktuellen Designelemente drin.
More
Also
beading, some more
mehr
edges,
Sicken,
and is
bisschen
simply
mehr
an
Kanten
evolutionary step
und
further.
ist einfach eine Evolutionsstufe weiter, auch motormäßig.
Some things with the engine were also improved.
Und ansonsten gab es halt
Otherwise,
parallel
there was parallel to the third series, ALI Special.
Quasi, ja, nicht ein Sondermodell,
Not a special
aber
model, but a more upscale version.
So basically, the LI-125 was also available as LIS or Special. It had the body elements of the SX, respectively the TV. This was the third series. But now we come to a particularly interesting model, which is basically the successor of the third series, the Lambretta DL.
DL, ja genau. DL heißt sie in Italien und vielen anderen Ländern.
In Italy
Und die
and many
Engländer
other
haben sie dann
countries, it
Sonderweg
was called
gewählt
DL.
und haben sie GP genannt,
The English called it
weil
GP,
die halt immer
because they have always been sporty.
Was that the same importer who was responsible for the TV200?
Right, exactly.
Which was called GT in the UK, by the way. So the English chose their own way there and also had the influence to push that through to Lambretta. What is special about the Lambretta DL?
ja, da kam
That's where
halt wieder
designer
der
Bertonet came in
Designer
again
Bertone
and
ins
moved the
Spiel
design forward a decade.
und hat das Design einfach
This was
ja,
already a
ein
design
Jahrzehnt
that you'd have in
nach
the
vorne
70s.
gebracht. Also das ist jetzt wirklich schon Design, wie man es in den 70er Jahren eigentlich hatte.
You can just see that a
Und da
lot of
sieht
the
man halt
chrome
einfach, dass
parts
viele
have been
Chromteile
replaced with
ersetzt
matte
wurden
black
durch
components.
mattschwarze Komponenten. Auch die
The
Gummis
rubbers have
sind
also
von
been
grau auf
changed from
schwarz
grey to
gewechselt.
black.
Und
The handlebars are quite a
der
bit
Lenker
deeper,
ist
so the frame is shorter
um
here.
einiges tiefer. Also,
Also,
der Rahmen ist
the handlebars
kürzer
are further
hier. Der
down,
Lenker sitzt weiter unten,
which
was
adds to
halt
the
einfach eine
sportier riding
sportlichere
position.
Sitzposition bringt.
The whole
Das
thing has
Ganze wurde
already
schon
been
ein bisschen
shifted
so
towards
Richtung Sportlichkeit
sportiness.
verschoben.
So a short time after the Louis Vega Cometo was designed by Bertone, he was bored and said, "Let's just do the big models now." So this one has more chrome now and even more elegant elements. This is what stands out. It gets sleeker and sportier, Bertone style, as you know from many other models. In my opinion, the most beautiful detail on the GP is the following. I really like the Series 3 design, but it was missing a little bit for me. I always felt that the runout from the leg shield edge kind of looks like there's something missing. And that's probably exactly what Bertone thought too, because the leg shield became rounder and it comes slightly together down there. And then there are these funny things here called shark teeth. Of course, an English word. And I think that's a very stylish element, which was very successful. The DL, or GP in the UK, was again available in 3 displacement variants with 125, 150 and 200cc. This is a 200cc model. But this color was only available in Italy, wasn't it?
Ja, in Italien gab es nur
Yes,
dieses
in Italy there was only this ochre color.
Auf anderen Märkten
In
gab es
other
auch
markets
noch,
they
Rot,
also had it in red.
wie es bei uns,
In Italy
in
the
Italien
150s were
150er
also available in red.
Rot. Und eigentlich hat
Actually,
jede
each QP
Kubikklasse
class
auch
has its own colors.
Ja.
But in the UK they were also in more colors available,
Ja, eben.
weren't they?
In,
The 200S models were available in ochre and in red. Otherwise, they were only painted in ochre color.
The one that you're standing at right now is kind of the holy grail of Lambrettas. It's an original DL200. They're rare. Just 9,500 units were built. That's why they are really rare, high in demand, and very expensive. And if you want to find the really hot shit among these, you have to look for one with that sticker, right?
Genau,
Exactly.
die,
The electronic
Elektronik
models
wurde
were
auch,
built parallel to the
parallel
brake
zu der
ignition.
mit Unterbrecherzündung gebaut und
But there were a lot fewer electronic models
tendenziell
than models
wurden
with
dort
brake ignition.
deutlich weniger als die mit Unterbrecherzündung hergestellt.
Unfortunately,
leider
because
die
it was
Mengen
built within
nicht,
one
weil das
chassis
auch
number.
wieder unter einer Fahrgestellnummer
Some say
gebaut wurde.
200, some
Manche
say
sagen 200,
2000.
manche sagen 2000.
We don't know.
Weiß nicht. Also
But wasn't Lambretta particularly early with the electronic ignition? Because electronic stands for electronic ignition.
Yes, together they worked with Piaggio's electronic manufacturer Ducati, and did what Vespa has done a few years earlier. They eliminated the wear parts on the ignition.
Ducati Elektronikhersteller, der auch jetzt die Vespa-Zündungen immer gemacht hat.
And they were probably the first on the market who installed an off-the-shelf electronic ignition.
This is also the last model in the series. After that, nothing else was released.
Yes, so the sales numbers, despite actually some awesome innovations, went downhill.
Gingen die Verkaufszahlen bergab. Es war natürlich auch ein bisschen Krisenzeit da Anfang der 70er Jahre.
There was also a bit of a crisis period in the early 70s, also because of the whole scooter hype was basically more or less over. Innocenti then abandoned the scooter division.
But we'll talk about this later and keep a little tension for now. I want to use our setting that these 5 scooters are so nicely next to each other to summarize the model range again, because it's a little bit confusing for people who are not familiar with Lambretta. First series, Li and TV. Second series, the spotlight moves up, and again we have Li and TV. Third series, the body is changed a lot, and again we have Li and TV. Then there is a luxury version of the third series. It was called SX, or Special, or TV. It has a slightly different handlebar and a slightly different cascade. And finally, the last model, the DL, known in India and the UK as GP and designed by Bertone. And that's where it all ends. At least as far as Lambretta from Italy is concerned. But that's not the end of our video.